Elliotte. Comments from Patrick Waugh making the rounds today in the hockey world. He's made it clear he thinks he would be a great GM for the Montreal Canadiens. But I'll ask you this. With Gorton being named to the Montreal Canadiens front office, what does that tell you about what type of GM this organization is probably looking to hire?
First of all, Jackie, I could already see people saying that I look like I've been living under a rock the way I appear on the show sometimes. But I would say this, like, if you remember Jeff Gorton when he was in New York as the general manager of the Rangers, he didn't like a lot of the attention. He didn't like doing a lot of the media. He liked to do his job, and they had John Davidson there as the person who did a lot of the big-time media, and I think Gorton really liked that. And I think what you've got in Montreal, and I do think French matters there. A lot of their fan base, that's their primary language. A lot of their fan base, that's their only language. You have to have somebody to communicate. So I think that Gorton's going to be the number one person in terms of hockey decision-making in the organization. But I think they're gonna hire someone else who's going to be the face, maybe somebody a little bit younger who can learn or communicate, and eventually, should Gorton's time he ever move on or whatever, that person can grow and become the full-time the number one person in the organization. You've got some names on your screen. I do think even before Gorton was hired, I do think Daniel Briere's name was coming up in the organization. And I think he's someone they're going to take a long look at. Matthew Darche, similar. I think he's another person they're going to take a long look at. Roberto Luongo, to me the big question is this the right time for him? He's learning in Florida. He's got a really good situation there. That team is very good with the chance to do special things. I'm just not convinced this is the right time for Luongo. Martin Madden is a guy I've had several people recommend to me. Again, he's already the assistant GM in Anaheim. If you're coming to Montreal, but still you're going to be the number two person, is that going to be the kind of promotion that someone like Madden or Darche is going to want? And you mentioned Waugh's interest, and at the very least, I do think, Jackie, that they should talk to him. Like, Patrick Waugh's pretty smart, and I don't know, what role they would necessarily want or give him, but I would talk to him.
Let me follow up on Patrick Waugh, because during his time in Colorado, when you're plugged into these things, I hear things as well. I mean, he is a smart guy, but he's a headstrong guy, and he's somebody that's used to being the guy that makes decisions. And with the Montreal Canadiens there, with Jeff Gorton already in place, do you see it as a possible fit? Because Patrick can say all the right things, but he's got a long body of work and a long history, and he is a huge name, and even a bigger name in the province of Quebec.
Well, EJ, as a person who can be pretty headstrong, although probably not on Waugh's level, I have some sympathy for that. I agree with you that you're right. The way he left Colorado, it wasn't good. It made a lot of people were angry about it. He didn't handle it right. He did a bad thing for the franchise there. That said, I think you reach points where you're entitled to show that you've learned your lesson, and you maybe come out of a statute of limitations of saying, okay, should that prevent you from getting a job? And I think, as you said, he's got a long history of a certain type of behavior. What you might have to do is say, Patrick, you're not going to be the GM. But if you want to come on here in a role and be part of the organization, then we're willing to listen, also with the understanding that if you do one thing that we deem out of line, that's it. Like, when it comes to me, I don't mind being surrounded with people who don't agree with me or think my opinions are stupid, like Kevin Bieksa does all the time, as long as I'm with somebody who makes the team better. And that's what I would say to Waugh. I would say to him, look, if you want to come work here, it might not be the position you want, it might not be the influence you want, but your opinion will get listened to. And I would at least throw that on his lap and see how he responds to that.
I just love that he just, in true Waugh form, just threw it out there first chance he got. Like, I think I'd be a great hire. How about Jake DeBrusk?
He's confident.
Yeah, hey, listen, confident. Confidence is a good thing, right? So,
yes,
I mean, it works for him.
Confidence is key.
Yes. How about Jake DeBrusk? Must have taken some confidence to ask for a trade from the likes of the Boston Bruins. Ryan Rishaug reporting 8+ teams have already expressed their interest. What are you hearing on the DeBrusk front and potential landing spots for him? And what might the return be for a player like Jake DeBrusk?
Well, Jackie, I do think now is some bit more time to talk about it. I think there was an initial trade request last summer after the season, and I do think Boston investigated it. Obviously, it didn't happen. The two sides came back this year and said, let's see if we can make it work. And DeBrusk was unhappy with the scratch, and now here we are. I do think Boston is looking very hard at this. I think they're going to take a very legitimate run at trying to move him. You know, the big challenge for them right now is Blid got hurt the other night, Marchand is suspended, and they can't call anybody up from Providence because of the COVID outbreak there. So it's kind of a really bad time for them to even shorthand their team a bit more. The one thing I've been told about Boston is they're not going to do anything that's going to make themselves worse. They're battling for the playoffs right now. They want, if they trade DeBrusk, they want something that can help them now, or at least open up the possibility of someone who can help them now. I do agree. I would say there's more than 8 teams. I'm sure a ton of teams, if not almost everybody, has checked in on DeBrusk. Now, there are some teams that can do it more than others, but he's a young guy still, and he's got talent, and teams are going to look at it and say, can we make the change here? And, you know, one of the teams I've kind of wondered about, and this is my own personal opinion, is a team like Seattle. You know, they're going to need to find some more scoring and some more good players. I wonder if they would be interested. And one of the guys I kind of wonder if the Bruins would be interested in, because it helps them salary-wise, he's a good player, is a guy like Mason Appleton. And Appleton had a really good role last year in Winnipeg as a third-line player. It hasn't worked for him until last night so far in Seattle. I do think teams are looking at him. I think he could potentially be available. And that's just something I'm throwing together. But I do think there's a lot of teams interested in DeBrusk, and the Bruins, they don't want to make themselves worse now, that's for sure.
Elliotte, there was some reporting today from Frank Sarvalli with the Daily Faceoff that the NHL had sent a memo to all teams regarding the current COVID spike. What's the level of concern around the league right now that you're sensing?
On a scale of 1 to 10, EJ, I'd say it's about 647. I would go with. You know, I had one executive say to me today, yesterday we're all talking about Montreal, today we're all talking about Omicron. And, you know, maybe I shouldn't joke about it, maybe that's too glib, but, you know, people are worried. You know, they're worried about the Olympics, they're worried about games. You know, there's a big concern about it. You know, you look at the AHL in the East right now. You know, Hartford, Hershey, Providence. You know, they're really worried about it. You know, Bruce Cassidy's in COVID protocol now. Tyler Bozak from St. Louis. Carolina had a couple of guys. Carolina's in a situation right now. They're supposed to go to Canada next week. They could have guys clear COVID protocol and still not be able to go to Canada with the team for that 4-game trip because of the border rules. So I just think that we're unfortunately trending in the wrong direction. And with each day that this goes and the more it grows, even with what's happening outside the NHL, I think there's real worries about the Olympics.
Yeah, Carolina going into a game tonight, missing 3 of their defensemen. Going to be tough sledding for them. Speaking of which, I got to get your thoughts on Philly. President and GM Chuck Fletcher met the media today. You know, I watched it, Elliotte. There was nothing really crazy that came out of Chuck Fletcher today from my standpoint, but you've seen a lot of GMs address the media over the years. If there's anything that stood out to you as that maybe kind of perked your ears, what was it?
I think that first of all, I wasn't surprised he was patient because that's Chuck Fletcher's way. He really tries not to do knee-jerk things. But I have to tell you, Jackie, watching him the other night against New Jersey and watching the way they were dominated by the Devils 5-on-5, I really thought he was going to have to do something. So while I wasn't surprised because of his nature, I was surprised he did that. You know, the other thing, I was a bit surprised he said we're not going to do anything right now. I was really interested about some of the stuff he said about the power play, where he said it's personnel. You know, he said it's not coaching. You know, the coaches there in Philly, the fans have been on them. I kind of wondered, could they go to someone like Rick Tocchet if they wanted to? But I think that's the thing that really stood out to me today with Fletcher is he said, look, stop blaming the coaches for the power play. He said it's a personnel thing and it's been here longer than I've been here and these coaches have been here. And that's what kind of stood out to me. I have to tell you, if you looked at their schedule next week, it is they have a brutal schedule next week. Yeah. Back-to-back at home. a day off at Jersey, a day off at Vegas, at Arizona. Man, that's going to be an ugly, challenging week for them.
And the back-to-back at home, I believe, is Tampa Bay and Colorado. So good luck.
Yeah.
At that
5 games in 7 nights. Yeah. That's a tough one.
Yeah,
that's a real tough one.
This whole stretch for them, Elliotte, going back a couple weeks ago, has been really difficult schedule-wise, but we'll see if they can navigate it. Let me go out to the other side of North America, to Vancouver. It's been a rocky year for the Canucks. I'm sure you've been answering questions about them just about since opening night. There's some people are wondering, does Jim Benning have the authority to make changes? When you hear stuff like that, you really start to wonder what's going on. What are you hearing?
Well, what I'm hearing is I think that they looked at the possibility of a coaching change, and they thought about Claude Julien, who they had permission to talk to, and Scott Walker. And in both situations, they decided not to do it. And what I think that does say to me that, the organization is looking at big changes and they're doing their due diligence. One of the things that is kind of we learned here is that Jeff Molson got within 36 hours of remaking his front office, and nobody knew about it. Like, he was making those changes on Monday. I really believe, whether we found out about them or not, and it took us till 36 hours before to get an inkling of what he was doing. And I think Vancouver's kind of doing the same thing right now. I think they're looking to see who's out there. They're doing their due diligence. I mean, you have to be so careful when you hire now. You got to make sure you can't miss anything. And I think that's what the Canucks are doing right now. And I don't think they're going to make any long-term changes until I don't think they're going to make any long-term changes until they've found the people that they want to hire. That's where I think it stands right now.
All right, so a wait-and-see situation for the Vancouver Canucks. Elliotte, always a pleasure chatting with you, although I feel like this conversation was about a lot of struggling teams right now. We'll try for some more positivity the next time we have you on.
As you know, negativity sells, Jackie. Yeah. That's where we go.
Hey, it makes our job way easier. That's for sure. Thanks for this, Elliotte.
All right, take care, guys. Good to chat with you and EJ. And, well, didn't chat with Brian, but good to see you, Brian.
I'm back on now. You're so cheery, I took a segment off.
See you, Elliotte.
All right, take care, guys.